Now we're going to go through the instructions on setting up the Solid G without the display unit. Now, I first want to start by saying the Solid G was intended to be set up using the G view. We don't sell them as a set because we don't want to force you to have to buy a G view every time you buy a Solid G, because once you have your first G view, you don't need more. You can use it for the Solid G and the HEG. But we highly recommend the G view for setting this up. You get a lot more functionality out of the gyro with the G view. But for setting up without, let's go ahead and read the instructions and start the setup. Turn your radio on and set your rudder trim to neutral so that you can have the proper initialization on the gyro. Now, step 2, you're going to start going to servo type. So you push the P button and you observe what the lights do. In this case, we're getting one green, one red, which reading your manual relates to the Petaba 9253 and JR8900G. If you want to change which servo this is, you push the L or H button to scroll between them. In this case, I push the H button, which gives us one green, two reds, which is the Petaba 9251 or 9256. You can keep scrolling through the options by pushing the L or H button. In this case, I'm going to go back to the one green, one red, which is 9253 8900G option, because the 8900 is what's in here. So once you select your servo type in step 2, you're going to push P again. It takes you to the tail rotor neutral setting. In this case, you're going to get a fast red-green flashing. And what's going to happen then is the tail rotor servo is going to go to neutral. And this is where you would want to set the geometry of your tail rotor. So you want to make sure your servo arm, and your control arm, and your push rod are at 90 degrees. Your tail rotor mechanism, wherever it is, if you have an eye lever or any other thing in between the servo and the tail, you want to make sure those are at 90 degrees, and your slider is in the center of its travel, so you know you're in neutral. So this geometry setup is equivalent to some gyros where you set up having it in rate mode and hover it and trim it, and then you land it and switch to heading mode. You don't have to fly ours to set up the neutral. You use this geometry in your neutral setup. There's no rate mode to fly it in. You just go fly. So once you're done step 3, setting the tail rotor neutral, you push P again. This is like your gyro direction. And you're going to get a light depending on whether it's presently in normal or reverse mode. In this case, it's pulsing red, which means it's in reverse mode for this helicopter. If I push the L or the H, it's going to then go to a steady red, and that means it's in normal. What you need to do is check your tail rotor direction by first moving your control, seeing which is right tail rotor. Then you want to move the helicopter. What I always do is just move the nose to the left and make sure you're getting a right input from the tail servo. If you're not, then you want to reverse it, so that when you give a left movement, you get a right input. And in this case, reverse is correct for this model. Once you set the gyro direction, you're going to move on to the next step. Step 5, you push the P button, and this is going to set the right limit. Now, if you've never set up this gyro, this one has been set up, but if you've never set up this gyro before, you're going to get a steady green to start up on step 5. And what this is saying is you need to tell it which is right rudder. In this case, you hold a right rudder input, telling the gyro which one's right. That will immediately then take you to the right limit setting. It will go to its full limit. If that's not enough of a limit and needs to go further, you add right until it hits the limit. Then you add a little bit of left till it's just slightly off the limit. You want it very close to hitting, but not quite. So once the right limit is set, you then push the P button again, and that'll take you to the left limit. Now, this is the same as the right in the sense that it's going to move to what it thinks is the left limit. You're going to hold more left to increase the limit. And if that's too much, hold some right to come off the limit. And that's it for step 6 on setting the limit. You can then just push the P button. That takes you out of setup mode, and you're now ready to fly the helicopter.